fascinating. Victoria Shroff is a King's Counsel, which we are going to get to in a minute. I just think it sounds so fabulous, in Vancouver, Canada. But you are part of the Oxford Centre for Animal Ethics in England. And you guys reached out because you're working on global standards for animals or global ethics for animals. Just basically, why aren't we all holding hands and singing Kumbaya for animals, right? That's part of your job. So first, will you explain? Only I am so curious because my grandfather was called King's Counsel, and I thought, isn't that just a lawyer? But maybe it's more than a lawyer. Maybe in Canada, that's what you guys call lawyers. So please explain.
Okay, the basic rundown on KC. So you get to write in your postnominals KC after your name. And it signifies, according to the Attorney General's press release, when you get appointed King's Counsel, it signifies an elevated standing for usually excellent legal work over the years. And so it's a recognition of
Oh,
somebody's contributions to the law. So your
oh,
grandfather obviously did something to warrant that, and as did my father. And I'm actually the fourth generation in my family to be a lawyer, but I'm the second
wow.
King's Counsel. Yeah.
That's really cool. So before we get to what you're going to be talking about on behalf of animals, what did you do that gave you the gold star?
I think largely because I've been one of Canada's pioneering animal law lawyers for over 25 years.
Wow.
And so I also teach animal law. I wrote a book. That's my book right there, Canadian Animal Law, on that little bookshelf. And I'm just embedded in the shaping of animal law in Canada. And so part of my outlook has to be global because what we do here in Canada also affects what happens in the UK, what happens in the States. We're it's one health, one world. And I
Right.
really believe in that ethos. So that's why I talk about having a global platform as well.
So when we think of animals in Canada, we all think I don't know, the royal we, think you're King's Counsel, so I can be the royal we. We think of Canada as being an enormously unpopulated place with gorgeous landscapes, lots of landscape for animals, lowercase animals. I don't know which ones, but I'm thinking apex predators, big animals that we aren't bothering them, they aren't bothering us. Now, I could be wrong, but are there things being done in Canada that threaten the welfare or the future of some or all of these animals?
Oh, definitely. For example, we still have culling of animals. To save one animal, we will cull or kill another. For example, caribou, they're being eliminated. They're trying to be saved. And so we're eliminating wolves to try to save them,
Ooh,
which
ooh,
is
that's bad. That's
it's
so
backwards
bad.
thinking, isn't it? It's not the thinking that a conservationist would come to. Is how do we actually preserve habitat and then let
Right.
everybody exist? And so, what part of that is called coexistence. And we need to learn to live with other species. So, we can't go in as humans, destroy a habitat, and then say, wait a minute, now all the big caribou are leaving us. No, it's not like that. We need to be able to figure out why their homelands have been degraded to the point where they can't live there and they're easy to pick off by wolves. And then we blame the wolves. No. Or we blame the coyotes for issues in urban parks when people are feeding coyotes as if they were dogs.
Yes.
So we
Yes.
have a
And
long way to go.
in America, we had almost completely eradicated wolves on the behalf of shepherds who were shepherds. I don't mean little guys with a crook and a little flask of wine, major industrial strength shepherds who were using, as I understand it, and I'm not against people raising sheep or cattle or anything else, but it was on, I understand, national or federal land, so they could use it for free. And then they were not happy that wolves were coming in and picking off some of the flock, which were breakfast, lunch, and dinner inside the pen. And maybe they couldn't get a nice Great Pyrenees dog to protect them. Maybe they could have, but they didn't. So
Right.
we've created a nightmare here. And surely you look to the south, to your neighbors, and think, ooh, what could we learn from these impulsive Americans? Because we got rid of the wolves, and now we have, at very least, a big deer problem. And that's not the same as a caribou dwindling problem, but they all are, as you say, one globe. So what about that? Don't the people in Canada that are going for, let's get rid of these dang wolves, don't they say, wait a minute, those Americans did it, and now what?
Yeah, no, I think that we're very slow to learn from other countries. That's part of it. That we can see what's happened, for example, with all kinds of different things like hunting, agricultural practices. We stand to learn a lot from other countries, whether it be from the States or whether it be from the UK or some of the European standards that are more advanced than we have in North America. We could learn from them, but we don't. So this is where part of my platform in education is raising the bar and saying, first, we have to stop thinking of animals as property. That is
Hmm.
the basis for all of this. Just to segue from getting to some of the meta issues, because animals right now, they're commodities. They can be
Hmm.
owned by people, and that's just about every animal except for wild animals, which are said to be owned by the state or the crown, depending on where you
Oh,
are.
really?
Yeah, yeah. So there's property in wildlife until somebody ends up killing that wildlife. If they have a hunting permit and they've legally killed an animal, like let's say a deer, they can take that animal home and that animal becomes their property if it's done within the confines of the law. So that's how property changes hands. But again, we're not looking at animals as sentient. So that's one of my big platforms for the last 25 years is saying, can we move away from the property paradigm and start to see animals for who they are? They are sentient living beings.
And they have a life and they have relationships with
Yes,
the earth, with each other.
exactly.
And and they're important to the whole ecological system. I want to just say, you and I are not saying, oh, Canadians are slow or thick-headed. You're human. That's your problem. Because
Yeah,
humans don't learn from each other. It's not that Canadians don't learn from other
right,
countries. We
right.
don't. We Americans and Europeans, I don't know what we learn from other countries. Maybe something, maybe nothing. And who knows how much is driven by the almighty dollar, be it
Most
Canadian or US,
point.
right?
Yeah,
There's got to be money that is driving some of these choices and decisions. Is that true?
absolutely. Money undermines ethics 9 out of 10 times in almost any scenario you want to bring forward. And
Yes.
no different for animals. So while, like I say, we could learn about sentient standards that the UK's been driving, for example, our laws in Canada are largely based on UK laws
That's
from the old English laws. And we have a common law system. We have legislation that sometimes protects animals or on paper protects animals. And then it's the reality of having the resources to back it. And again, money, right? So there's so much that comes in when we talk about animal protection, when we talk about elevating animals beyond mere chattels. And Tracy, this is something that I tell my students when I teach, and it's that until 1960 in Canada, all women didn't have the vote. 1960. That is within a lot of people's
wow.
lifetimes. And
Wow.
so that was when finally Indigenous women in Canada were permitted to vote, which to me is crazy how recent that is.
That's absolutely mind-boggling. Isn't that extraordinary? And yet you come from a family of lawyers, so you were allowed to be a lawyer. But if you had been born X number of decades earlier, you could have been a lawyer, but you certainly couldn't have voted.
Exactly. I couldn't have voted. I probably couldn't have my own bank account.
That's right.
You
You
remember
couldn't
when
own property or
couldn't own
something or
property.
sign.
You couldn't have a credit card. So we look at how it's not to say that women are the exact same as animals. I'm not saying that. But although humans are animals too, this is a fact. But what
Yes.
I am saying is that disenfranchised groups have always had to say, come on, we need to look at rights, but we also need to look at responsibility. So we can say, oh, okay, like the state has been generally omnipresent for a white Anglo-Saxon male. That is
Right.
where things have been globally. And so now we have to say, we need to actually step up and say, how do we bring some sense of equity, equality, and fairness to animals? Because we're 98% animal anyway. Like our DNA is so close to animals, it's not even funny. We're even close to fruit flies. I think somewhere around the area of 60%. I said this in my TED talk, and people are like, really? Yeah,
That's
actually.
cool.
Yeah. So
I guess you know Jonathan Balcom's book Superfly.
Yeah.
Flies are so much more resilient, smart, creative, and industrious than we are. If only we had some of their qualities. We may
Right.
have their DNA, but we don't have all of their amazing abilities.
And I think that people are seeing before an animal that would have been seen as kind of nothing, just fodder, people are saying, oh my goodness, look at what this animal can do. And we start doing a comparison and saying, let's look at the intelligence of animals and their cognitive abilities. And one of the most famous lawyers in the state, in the world, actually happened to be the New York based non human rights founder, Stephen Wise. He passed not too long ago. And Stephen had this idea that animals were persons too under the law. Because he would say, for example, a corporation can have rights. Why can't an animal, right? A corporation's a piece of paper. And so he was fighting for animals as to have them broken out of the New York Zoo and things like that. The Bronx Zoo had Happy the elephant, a very unhappy elephant, and to understand the advanced cognition that these animals have and to grant them what's called personhood. So the States has had these amazing pockets and amazing folks in both teaching and in the practice of animal law that have been in the vanguard of bringing animals out front and saying, how can we consider animals as more than property? And Stephen Wise's work, it lives on.
Interesting. It lives on also as, oh, excuse me for his heirs and lovers, a crackpot. Great. Let's open the New York City Zoo and let them all run down Fifth Avenue. A lot of people with dreams based on very highfalutin ideas that are completely impractical suggest things which are beyond fringe. They're way out there. And to you, as someone teaching law students, they're often espousing highly unlawful behavior, like breaking into facilities of various kinds. I'm not saying that we don't need revolutionaries in society. We probably do. We probably need somebody who goes up a tree and lives there for 90 days so you don't cut the tree down because the forest and the planet and global warming. But that's really not going to be the ultimate solution. So, what do you do with the next generation of fresh faced, bright eyed students who say, oh, Stephen Weiss, I haven't heard of him, or Peter Singer, or these people who were just adamant, ferocious revolutionaries.
Yeah.
And they lived and died. And I guess their stories live on. I don't know that they have a legacy that lives on, but how do you help people who are practical in the real world that need to make a living, but want to put their heart and soul and ethics and morals into what they do? How do you help them bridge reality and what I would consider fantasy on the part of people who want the unhappy elephant out of the zoo?
Sure.
Nobody wants an unhappy elephant in the zoo, but once he's in the zoo, you got to live his life out there because no one's transporting him back to Africa where they will poach him for his tusks.
So we have had very good ideas for moving animals. And we've had, for example, Joyce Poole and all these other animal experts, including Jane Goodall and people like that also passed away, as we know. And we've had them say there's a chance to rehabilitate some of them, or there's a chance to at least bring in a companion, or there's a chance to make
Right.
a better enclosure, which is sad because those are welfare compromises. But sometimes there's no way, as you say, an animal can be returned to the wild.
Right.
Rewilding is a whole another topic for another day. But the idea of saying, can we at least have incremental improvements in standards
Yes.
at the
Yes.
very least? And you ask the question, how do I bring this across to students? So yeah, absolutely. I don't ever encourage breaking the law. That's not something I do. That's more of an advocacy end of things. What I say is start small. So maybe
Mm-hmm.
you can have a meatless Monday. Maybe you say,
Yes.
I can have a beans Wednesday. I can
Yeah.
just I can take animals off the plate a couple days a week. Or I can start looking at my shampoo bottle and looking at the
Right.
writing on the back and seeing, do we have a rabbit at the back showing that this has been not basically nobody was harmed in the making of this shampoo or this
Right.
eyeliner or whatever this lipstick was. So do a little bit of research on a small thing. Fix the lipstick you're wearing. Fix
Yeah.
the brand of shirt you're wearing, because that person who owns that company destroy the Amazon rainforest?
Right.
Probably the answer is yes to half of the stuff we own. It's a question of looking beyond labels and manufacturing things. And I think if people start small, it's more manageable. We need bite-sized
Yes.
learning. because you can't say to somebody, that's it, throw open the doors, we're going to let animals run up and down Fifth. It's not realistic for anybody. The taxi drivers are going to be mad. It's not going to work in NYC, right? So we have to think, how do we actually make this happen in reality? So bridging that reality really does start with first seeing animals as sentient, moving them beyond property, and then building that into legislation so that animals have protections.
So we started out talking about caribou and wolves. First of all, caribou, I'm unfamiliar with them. Are they like elk or moose?
Yes. Yeah.
They're big like that,
big, they're called
huge.
big ungulates. Yeah.
Okay. So they're animals that a pack of wolves could set upon from the rear, I assume, and take the caribou down and eat at least some parts of it, and then other animals eat the rest of it. But that's the sort of the nature of nature, right?
Right.
And you have apex
Right.
predators and you have also apex prey, which certainly a caribou, or I don't know, I guess I don't even know if a giant brown or black bear is even prey. Maybe he or she is also only a predator. But we have to let some of the natural balance take place, as long as you said, we don't put a housing development in their mating acreage. So,
Exactly.
how do we stop now the killing off of these wolves? Once you kill them off, you wind up like America. We're trying to reintroduce a handful of wolves at a time. There are scientists and ethologists spending their entire lives raising a wolf who won't be too tame, who can go back out, and then what? Poor
Yeah.
guy or gal. They're alone out there, and do they know how to even take down a caribou? I don't know. But we've
Right.
upset the balance so badly, we've set it back for decades. So, how do we, you, of course, do something in Canada to put the brakes on?
I think we start by saying, let's get some really good studies done, which we have, and see why this culling doesn't work. Why does killing one animal save another? It doesn't work. It's been proven to be a fallacy to say this is how it's going to work. So the conservationists have come up with all kinds of studies, and they've talked about how you can actually have a successful eco balance, because that's what we're talking about again, is
That's
an
right.
eco balance. And if
Hmm.
you when the habitat's gone, everything's gone. We look
That's
at it
right.
sort of one living tree. And this is what I talk about in my book, Canadian Animal Law. And I say, think of life and the law as a living tree with many limbs. And there are so many insects and small animals and
Yeah.
big animals living in and around the tree. How does everybody get to survive and thrive? How do we do that? How do we get to a point where everybody gets a shot at life and to have a good life? So I think you start by looking at a damaged environment and you say, hang on, what's going to happen? I'll tell you what happens. Once people start to feel it, people start to feel it, not the animals.
That's right.
That's when often legislators stop and they go, hang on, people are affected. So that's when it comes to the attention of legislatures and it comes to the attention of the lawmakers to say, we need to put the brakes on this. We need to look at this more carefully. This killing one animal to save another is a fallacy. It's a tautological nonsense. It doesn't work. It doesn't work in the environment. We need to step back and maybe stop mining this area.
But if money weren't involved, then it would just be a practical decision. And there's probably a lot of money already sunk into that mining or that culling of the trees in order to make a development. You're such a big country and wide open. If you look at England, where your Oxford Center for Animal Ethics is based, it's a tiny island, and every inch of it is pretty much spoken for, and yet still more humans are coming along and they want to spread out. So I imagine they deal with some of these issues, but they probably deal with them a little more proactively because they are so cramped, if you will. They can't just wantonly say put up a housing block or put up a multi-story development if that's a nesting ground or a traipsing ground for a certain kind of animal.
Exactly, exactly. No, and I think they have specific sentience laws in England, and we also have advanced thinkers in animal ethics. Professor Lindsay, Andrew Lindsay, and he's written a lot about this, and same with Claire Lindsay at the Oxford Center. And
Yes.
they run a summer school where they get people from all over the world to come and in August to converge in Oxford to think about these issues and to bring forward ideas. And so it's really interesting to have this global share where people get to come into a room and discuss how are we going to make the world a better place, not just
Hmm.
this one pocket, but we're going to actually see how this can have ripple effects. Because what happens to, they say, a butterfly in Argentina is going to,
That's right.
it's going to affect you in New Jersey. It's going to affect you in other parts of the world. And people start to make connections between what happens to the natural world and what happens to them. And then they start to take notice when they don't have fresh water to drink, when they
Right.
everything's poisoned.
Yeah.
Then people are going to stop and
Uh,
take
uh,
notice.
Unfortunately, we are a little late to the party. Claire Lindsay's been on this show and it was a wonderful contributor. And when someone's an intellectual and a professor, we think, oh, this is a high minded, big thinking person. You being a lawyer, we think, oh, she's more practical. She's going to do something more actively, not just change hearts and minds, but maybe change laws, change behavior in
Yeah.
society. Which it would seem that one may need a law with people, because if in fact we wait until we've poisoned it all, and then we're like, oh, eek, we've poisoned it. Oh, and our poor little children and grandchildren, my God, to turn that back is really hard. Whereas stopping short would be great. And if it's on behalf of animals, as you say, we, the human animal, benefit as well, right?
That's so true. And so what we've done is, like, for example, here in the province where I live, British Columbia, we've changed the laws in one area in our family law to account for companion animals, dogs and cats, usually dogs, cats, rabbits, as more than bare property. And it's the only
Really?
law of its kind in Canada.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Congratulations.
yeah. So it's a big deal. And I think we're seeing how that's actually made a difference to how our laws now look at companion animals within the context of who gets the dog when the couple splits up,
That's right.
which is monumental. It's actually
Uh-huh.
one of the most groundbreaking laws that we've had in Canada in all the time I've been practicing.
That's really exciting
Yeah.
because it people that own small animals, as opposed to a caribou. That's why I say small. They could also own an Irish wolfhound. But we all have known for a long time that they are members of our family. Recently in the pet industry, they're going, you know what? They're members of our family. Yeah, they've always been members of our family, for heaven's sake. And they've always slept in our bedroom, at least in modern times. But to have the law back us up so that we are protected as well as the animals are protected, so that if a neighbor tries to, I don't know, poison or shoot our dog or cat, they don't like how it's behaving. I imagine in British Columbia, that's something people don't do as readily if they were inclined to, because the law will come after them.
Right? So this is specifically under this statute, the family law statute, which is a very big statute in British Columbia. And so I got to say, it was one of the highlights of my career to stand up on the podium with the premier of our province and the attorney general introducing me as one of the people who helped shape this new law, to say, you know what, animals really are family, and have the premier say that, where my platform was always animals are more than toasters, just to make it really
Right,
simplified for people.
right.
A toaster is a thing. An
Yes.
animal is a sentient being who, as you say, shares your bed, shares your life, probably rules your household. I know my animals rule my household,
Oh,
like
yeah.
yours rule yours.
Totally. Victoria, just in wrapping up, it is extraordinary that you have spent your life doing this and that you get that cherry on top of legal success. That is rare that someone has that, no matter how hard they work and how right they are and how smart they are. So good for you. You deserve more than your KC, because that's an extraordinary accomplishment. And let's hope that it trickles down to other parts of Canada and to the South, to we Americans. It would be wonderful if this became adopted. It will eventually affect even the wild animals in our thinking. Thank you so much for the good work you're doing and for spending time talking about it. Really appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Tracy. It was a wonderful to spend time with you today.